And I ask you to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before I get started, I will read a quick memo in regards to OSHA. In order to avoid unnecessary fines from Oregon OSHA for violating the governor's mask mandate, I'd like to note that there are signs requesting people to wear a mask at the entrance of the building. Masks are available to use at the back of the room, and this is an audible reminder of the mandate as outlined in OSHA Workplace Advisory Memo 8.13.21. Julie, go ahead and do roll call, please.
Commissioner Nyquist. Commissioner Springer. Here. Commissioner Tucker.
Present.
Counselor Trask.
Here.
Counselor Sanchez.
Here.
Counselor Coleman.
Present.
Mayor Mahler.
Present.
Counselor Gerson.
Present.
Counselor Richards.
Present. Counselor
Gorley.
Present.
Thank you, Julie. I want to start off, first of all, let's go ahead and those that weren't part of the roll call, if you just real quick, just say your name and who you're affiliated with so that everybody in the room knows all the people here tonight. So we'll just start at this end and work our way around.
Ray Towery, City Manager.
Larry Larson, Community and Economic Development Director.
Jeff Linn, Police Chief.
Robert Snyder, City Attorney.
I'll just go on the back of the room if we can.
Fire, Family Assistance Resource Center.
I want to thank everybody for coming this evening. I appreciate that. I also want to especially thank our county commissioners, Nyquist, Tucker, and Springer for making time this evening. I know you guys are very busy. I appreciate everything you do for our city and everything that you've done for the county. Tonight's a work session, so there will be no decisions to be made, just as a reminder for our council. The topic of discussions this evening will be the homeless shelter and the mill property development. And we're going to go ahead and start off with the homeless shelter. And so if we want to just kind of give a quick summary of where we're at with that.
Yeah, I think everyone's aware with the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, as the council is aware, and I'm sure the commissioners are aware, kind of set in motion an understanding, which was then codified by the Oregon legislature this year regarding how to help communities deal with homelessness. As a result of these, we've been working for some time to try and figure out a good way that is both humane and also mitigates the impacts on our community. The Community Health Committee has been working really hard, led by Councilor Gorley and subcommittee with FAC and Dr. Horton. The police department, Sean Morgan, and Public Works, we've all been working really hard to work towards, I'm going to call it a solution, but I think the reality is homelessness isn't going away. Several of us went to Walla, Washington and toured a facility there that's been extremely successful. It has been very well supported by the community there, and we've been looking at that as a template. The health committees continue to work towards that goal of a managed facility. FAC has been a partner with us as we've walked along that path, and that leaves us here tonight. The Community Health Committee looked at many different possibilities for the location of a managed homeless facility. And really, we came up with a location that is owned by the county between 22nd and 24th Avenue, just south of the railroad tracks. So we've reached out and began having discussions with the county about that property. The goal, I think everyone agrees, is that there would be a managed homeless facility there, as well as we've been working with Linn County Parks for some time on a location for an RV dump and fill station. From the city standpoint, that's a great partnership. We've been looking for a solution for a bulk fill station for some time, and our thoughts are that this might be something that can meet all of those needs. And so we've been working with the county for some time on that as well. So I think that's where we are. The goal here was to bring all of the decision makers to the table and have a discussion about how that might best look. I know that I've gotten some individual questions from commissioners and Linn County staff. We've answered those the best we could, shared some information back and forth regarding the facility. In front of you, there are some papers that I've shared. One would be the Sleep Center Policy Manual. It is a draft. It has not been approved or accepted by anybody at all at this point in time, I believe. The FAC body, has your board?
We would utilize that, but until we form the committee, there may be some additional based on
Right.
the committee of
Yeah. And then our attorney, Robert Snyder, put together, in discussions, there's been mention of both conveyance of the property to the city and potentially even a lease, which could then lead into the conveyance of the property. And so both of those are included in the document with the red draft mark on top. I think either way, whatever the you as decision makers are comfortable with, I think we would certainly welcome either or method. There was a concern regarding the county's ability to pursue and obtain the grant that they were looking for to help pay for the dump and fill station. I believe we got an answer today that so long as if the county doesn't own the property, there has to be a 25-year lease in place to the county for them to qualify. So, of course, it can't be right, simple and easy. So, however we want to deal with that is certainly on the table as well.
I'll open it up real quick for any questions of councilors. Okay. This obviously is beneficial for the lease, as far as what we could tell would be the best approach to this, especially take advantage of the grants. Would you not agree with that?
Absolutely. Anytime you can spend other people's money instead of your own, I think it's lowers the burden on the taxpayer, certainly.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Thank you. I'm not sure we're interested in a lease. I would rather give you the land. I'd rather only give you the piece that is represented by the outline and your description that represents roughly that whatever size property you desire. I would rather give you that piece of property and give you that size of the property and ask that you continue to work with us on the dump station. We'd like a little bit more of a width on the easement coming in. So there's a little bit of change we'd like to see there as well. But having served in that grant committee, that is correct. I served in the State Parks Grant Committee for years doing that. And you're right, 25 years is the usual 20 or 25-year lease would be the minimum they'd look at. If we gave it to you, the whole piece, we'd have to lease back. And I'd much rather be in control of my own destiny and have you in control of your own as well.
Okay. Anybody have thoughts on that? Okay. Well, you're probably right there in one sense that us having control of it. But what's the impact on the grant? Refresh my memory on that.
Excuse me?
The grant. How much was that again? Refresh my memory.
So it's the Oregon Opportunity Grant. It comes out of Oregon State Parks, and they will go up to 50% of what you ask for. The last couple of years, they've been giving exactly 50%. And the other 50% becomes match from the counties that are asking for it. And so there have been times when they've given less than the full amount asked for, but that's the grant. But by us giving you the acreage and us retaining the ownership of the other piece, doesn't affect the grant at all. We be in ownership, and we set our own destiny. And the rules about ownership are that if you own it, you're fine. But if you don't own it, you have to have a lease with 20 years left of the term. So a 25-year lease would be what they'd be looking for. But if we owned it, the question is do you want just that size of that property?
I'm probably going to, with that question, would refer that to Councilor Gorley and FAC and Dr. Horton, potentially. I think what we've looked at is what the size of the Walla facility. I think we padded that a bit and said 1.5 acres in the letter that we sent.
Well, we certainly need a little bit of space around it because many of these people who are homeless have vehicles that they need to get back and forth to work. And I noticed that the Walla facility had an exterior porta potty set up in case somebody showed up in the middle of the night. They'd be able to use that facility rather than, and there's a little space, a barrier around it. From the exterior looking into it, it would look like any other industrial site, but at the same time, you do see porta potties outside of industrial sites as well, but and the vehicles, but there wouldn't be RVs and stuff. So we'd want a little bit around land around it, but not an extensive amount.
Well, and
for
also,
parking.
we know we need to take in consideration the annex building too, because we're talking about our old city hall of taking that down there for kind of the, I guess the hall, the showers, the meeting with the counselors and the doctor. We have the city come in and work with the homeless and so forth. So I guess how would you describe what the total use of that annex building would be?
I think it's going to be the building which matches clients with services. I think that's probably the best way to. Also will act as a warming center during the colder parts of the year. Certain days it might be the cooling center. But it'd be the administrative offices for FAC and the meeting places for all of the service providers.
Refresh my memory, was there another building that's going to be proposed for that too, not counting our annex?
So we've talked about a temporary building, but depending on the time frame, whether the temporary building would be a benefit or not would depend on how quickly we were able to begin working on the permanent facility.
Yeah, because my concern would be that annex building is probably not quite big enough for the amount of people that we'll be dealing with. So I thought another annex building would probably be in need. That's why I was asking the question. I thought the health committee brought that up here recently in discussion.
Okay.
And then the Walla facility also long-term put in a shop, like a outbuilding that was rather large, so that as people transition from homelessness into housed, that they would be able to collect the furniture and the things that they needed and keep it there until they were able to become established. And for that transition piece, and it was nice that they would be able to do that and provide that service for people so that they're more successful.
So with that all said, you think still 1 acre is within? Okay. Now, one of the biggest questions coming back from the community has been the financial impact to our city. So therefore, that's why we looking at the grant. But if we own the property outright, then what other funding that we could possibly tap into to help offset if we don't get the grant?
So you have set aside $50,000 out of the budget this year for homelessness. Excuse me. FAC has secured some grant money already for this project, fairly significant, I believe.
For next year, we've secured 150,000, and then we have some remaining funds from this year. And we are currently working with some grant writers. I see today there's another rural area or small community grants of $1 million that they're planning to award to 5 communities that we'll plan to apply for. We've also worked with some other agencies such as CSC and others that have possibly some commitments for funds. The difficulty is we can't really engage them until we have an operation or a facility. So there is funds in those spaces, but until we actually have a facility, we can't engage them full time.
Okay. So I take it feasibly we could own this then and would not be financially impacted in totally at the end.
FAC has been great, and their goal is there would be zero financial impact to the city of Sweet Home.
Okay.
As great as that sounds, is that truly realistic? I don't think so. I mean, I think we're going to have to do things to support the efforts, whether it's, Public Works helping with the facility or the police department at the facility, those kinds of things. I think you'd have to expect that at some point in time we would have to, we would be looked to help support financially as well. I don't know what that number may be, and if everything works out, that might not be for several years. It may be never as well. So it's kind of your guess might be as good as mine or even better.
Okay.
But initially it sounds like it would be almost zero impact to the city budget.
So I guess if the county commissioners, if that was the direction you guys would consider, well, we can't. I understand we can't,
We have
but
not voted, we've not discussed this. Have no opinion about, but I'm talking about for me myself, having worked years, I would recommend give you the I would do that. The only thing I would ask would be a rock and city is making sure that the park is done inside of the property you guys manage and control. One of the problems the city of Albany has been when the homeless are turning away because they're a high barrier shelter right now. They're opening a low barrier one this coming year, but they're high barrier. They have to make cars in the street that they begin to overflow and look at the used car lot, and some of the cars end up dying. The cars don't move. They stay there for a long period of time. And there's an issue with them and Second Chance as well. But keeping the cars in the parking lot where they can have control, and management of the cars is an important issue. So I would just ask that if 1.5 acres isn't enough, ask for 1 3/4 acres, ask for 2, but make sure you ask for enough to have the cars inside of a side obscuring fence and on asphalt or in a parking lot. It makes it much easier for the community that has to go around and see that, to have it organized politely, people's goods back in the car, and those types of issues, and it's a challenge.
okay. Mr. Nyquist, you had something?
Sure. Thank you. I met in our exposure with John Morgan, Superintendent Horton, and the Chief. Time flies. When Mark was not that's a good one. So look, and my commitment time was that
Yeah.
we did recognize this meeting as well. I see no reason that we couldn't, by consensus at least, give you that commitment tonight. And
prepared to do that, as long as one commission, as long as those components coexist, in which
Okay, thank you, Roger.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Councilor Gordy, in that the one in Walla Walla, there was no vehicles inside. They were all outside on the fence line. And if we take the annex down there, it's gonna take up a lot of space, a lot of space. Now theirs, both of theirs were on the outside part of the property, but it was the end of the fence on both ends. So I would be concerned about taking a lot of space up with the other thing to, if we put that up there or down there, it would be taking up quite a chunk of property. So that'd be my concern at this point. Anyway. And I do believe that I don't want to get to a situation where you said we could have two anchors or whatever it is, and then only we use we need it. Let's say we take a one acre, and then we find out we're not close enough. I think it would be better in everybody's to at least take what we could use some expansion for. So I think we'd be better off to do it now than have to do something later. So that's just me.
Well, I agree with Commissioner Tucker. You ask more than you're going to need because in the end of the day, you may outgrow and regret you didn't ask for it in the end run. So I agree with that. So that's why I asked the questions. Make sure we know exactly how much we need because we don't want to outgrow it and then wish we did. So, and I know that annex building is fair size, so that's why I wanted to make sure if we have more than one. And it does throw with the vehicle discussion that takes space.
Yeah, and when you start adding in handicap ramps and different things, and we do want this to be highly successful. I think we have the opportunity here to do something that other communities are not doing, something that is a better solution than what we're seeing in other rural communities and our large metropolitan cities as well. And so the parking when I was there at the Walla Walla facility, which I think we're using as our model, was all head-in parking, and it was around the facility, not actually fenced in, so people can go and come to work. That was the goal, was to help people be able to be housed and employed. And so I think that we wouldn't need more than 2 acres. I think would be absolutely well within that. If we had to come up with long-term transitional housing or something, we can make other plans on another location. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ray, that, like Councilor Nyquist says, the time's been flying and winter's coming on pretty fast, so we got to take care of folks pretty quick here. And so enlighten us again about, we have moved it just briefly just to cover this winter, the maintenance.
We were prepping to create a location inside our current public works yard because it would be right next door. Our goal was to have that ready by December 1. If we reach some kind of consensus agreement today and we can do it quicker, we would much rather put all that work into a permanent site than into a temporary site and then have to do it again at a permanent site. And however long that might be, 3-4 weeks, whatever. So.
Thank you, Ray. That's why I wanted to bring that up so the commissioners know that there's kind of time urgency here on this a little bit. So see what we can put together sooner than later, if we can, potentially. So
if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
I believe, and our engineer Joe Grable can correct me, we looked at the exact size of the Walla Walla facility. Joe, do you remember exactly what that size was offhand? Wasn't it exactly 1 acre? Okay. 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 So Joe is, for those that can't hear, Joe is saying he thinks it's between 1 acre and 1.25 acres.
So 2 acres is probably more than enough.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, Ray, if you guys could describe if you guys could describe a legal description of that 2 acres, have it ready. I could work tomorrow and get a resolution order done. I think we could be ready to do it on Tuesday. We could do a consensus tonight. I think that I heard Chair Nyquist say a yay. I know that Sherry's heart has been engaged in this community. So I would think that we would be willing to give you the commitment that by next week, we can record a deed and it's your property.
Okay. I think the consensus of council, do you agree with that, the council? Consensus? Yeah.
Chair, do you have a problem with my directing staff to do that tomorrow? For Sherry?
Before we declare consensus, I want to make sure we have one.
Okay.
Appreciate that. Well, I'm still in the question phase.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Sherry.
There's discussion going on here. And so I'm making notes, and a couple of my questions have already been answered, one of them. So thank you. So one of my questions, and I'd never thought about this until Councilor Gorley, you started talking about the vehicles and we had that discussion. Motorhomes are a huge issue for private folks and governments to deal with. It costs on average $5,000 to $7,000 to take care of an abandoned RV. So what, and I know you've thought of this because it's an obvious one, what are the conversations around that? I'm starting to get a sense that maybe there'll be some fencing and folks that have cars are going to drive in with their cars inside that fencing, and why can't I park my motorhome outside the fencing?
Because we can't manage that. The idea is that they would actually park up to it, head in regular parking spots with their cars, but they cannot bring RVs in because exactly what you had mentioned, the cost. Although we have a lot of people in Oregon in general that are living in their RVs and it's their own space, but we just can't manage that. We can't facilitate security and different things that would affect that. So there are rules, and by having incentives of where you're able to stay and what that looks like, the little huts and stuff, we took pictures so that we can share them with you. It actually adds a strong dynamic for people to want to be there, but we just can't do everything for everybody. And RVs just isn't going to be part of it on the inside or the outside.
So maybe to the chief, what kind of discussions have you had around the RV issue? One of the concerns, and I hope this wouldn't be the case, but one of the concerns I have and I could envision is this influx of RVs and folks into the community. And it sounds like there's going to be a facility, and I honestly mean this, that's going to be attractive and be a good plan to move forward. And what about perhaps folks arriving in RVs and choosing what you rightly have described as a great option, choosing that over the RVs?
And you hit the nail on the head. RVs are extremely difficult to deal with, and we have a number in our community that we've been relying on some of our codes, which aren't necessarily effective in removing them, and then really the dialogue and trying to help the individuals in RVs find acceptable places to park them, which isn't in the city limits, in all honesty. And so that topic, yes, we do have some concerns on influx of individuals, and I know FAC has working on devising several options or pathways for people to access the facility that's going to be established, if it does get established, to where there's I don't want to speak for FAC, but some type of residency requirement, and it's just not necessarily a free-for-all for everybody coming from outside of the area and outside of the county even to come to the facility. Is it going to be ironclad? No. It's going to be subjective. I think most things are at this level. But I know FAC has committed to really trying to focus on helping those in our community. And, we can define what that community is, whether it's just Sweet Home or even extending into East Linn County. But it's definitely a concern. The RVs I haven't really necessarily been overly concerned about as far as the influx of RVs, simply because I know that FAC hadn't necessarily planned on having RVs just because of the risk of them being abandoned there, and then that can eat up a budget awful quick with a series of RVs. Now, quite honestly, I haven't envisioned people just leaving their RV somewhere and walking into the site because of the hopefully the residency requirement, whatever that amounts to, will kind of prevent some of that from happening.
The other dynamic that we're working on has to do with a motor vehicle. So in order to have a motor vehicle, it needs to be licensed, it needs to be insured as well. And there is a dynamic by which, I guess you could have an RV, but it would be to park it and stay at the facility. Part is not going to be staying in the RV, and then, then you're falling under motor vehicle type requirements, and it has to be an operational vehicle. You can't, like you said, store people's junk models or problem cars. And unfortunately, it is becoming a greater problem. The individuals feel that that's an alternative to not having housing. So a lot of individuals are going to motorhomes and trailers, and unfortunately, when they call us, there's not a lot we can do other than hit the campgrounds, and unfortunately, the campgrounds are selling. And that's really our solution. Our solution is not to have camping in the RV, either in the car or in an RV.
I got another question then.
Go ahead, sure.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. So I have Larry Horton and I. Research into the detail that everybody has had in this process. And the last thing that I'm interested in doing is micromanaging an organization that's doing this. That said, I also feel some level of responsibility entering into a contract that I at least have a level of comfort that success is more probable, more likely than not. And we talked about grant dollars here tonight, which grant dollars are great. Grant dollars are one time, most of the time. So without a spreadsheet, what is the financial plan to keep a sustainable operation without grants? I mean, I'm all for applying for grants and getting as many as you can. It's not the best way to budget because you may or may not get them. What does because Larry, you and I haven't had that discussion, and I didn't even ask you, I didn't think about it. What's projected as far as the sustainability of a program like this? And I'm assuming a nonprofit to keep that up and running.
So we will have some difficulty in regards to startup costs.
As Mr. Towery mentioned, as far as startup costs. So it's a little unknown, but what's a little more unique in our situation than most communities, and we've had quite a few other organizations come to us going, what's your secret? And it's a lot of similar to Walla Walla, where they had working arrangements with a nonprofit, with the city, close relationship, and with the community. And I'd have to say that Sweet Home is a community that's involved, and the city's involved, our partners are involved. And so it's a kind of a group effort, and we all want to see a good solution. As far as the actual sustainability piece, we've also talked about the options of opening a coffee shop. since I have those type of activities available and do job training and some other things that would raise money specifically for this particular effort in this community. We're also looking at other funding mechanisms, but right now it has been the DST grants that have we've relied a lot on. Yeah, that's the what do we call it? It's a big long acronym.
Where's the money come from?
It's a state-funded
Okay.
initiative. And then working with like CSC, as far as they are a governing body kind of that delegates and allocates funds. And then at least this year, there is quite a bit of funding for this effort in a lot of communities. But, I don't know where it goes in the future. And that's why we're looking at really, most of the funds go towards higher barrier operations. They go to women and children. There's a lot of funding for veterans, but it's the lowest barrier, which is the piece that we're attacking, which is the individuals you see that have issues with alcohol and drug, have mental stability issues, and so on and so forth. But this is the group that gets the least amount of funding. And so that is a key area that we're emphasizing and focused on. And we believe, we're working with Jeff Merkley's group in getting, working with him in some subcommittees at the federal level as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Moment.
Okay. Thank you, Sherry. And I share the same concerns about continuous financial impact on our community. That's been one of my biggest concerns, but I feel I have confidence that they can keep this going from a natural standpoint, but it's a concern. So getting back to the consensus of commissioners again.
Yeah. The other piece maybe to mention is, so it's not necessarily cost effectiveness, but it's cost avoidance. When you look at the Walla Walla operation, they declined their emergency room visits by over 30% in a year. And when you take the costs associated with emergency room visits or public works going out and cleaning up the areas and the police department dealing with issues, at least in that operation, they have seen some declines in kind of the balance sheet of costs and expenses. But, that's what I call cost avoidance. And so it still takes money, but, hopefully a lot less money. People are going to clinics rather than the emergency room at $1,000, an hour.
Mr. Mayor, if I could.
No, go ahead.
We, between the Sweet Home Fire and Ambulance District and the city, we're quite certain we're already spending about $100,000 a year to $120,000 a year on this issue. The Sweet Home Fire and Ambulance District is about 75,000, I think is what they said, is the number they gave us. In and of themselves. We don't have an emergency room locally. So they're forced to transport every time, which is quite expensive. So between us, our two agencies, we're already significantly in this game, whether we wanted to be or not. So again, part of our goal is, can we shift that funding from being reactive to proactive and try and make those expenditures much more positive instead of being as negative as they are.
So again, you guys were talking about consensus of ownership. Okay, so I guess.
One last question. I shouldn't say one last. One last question, and I probably shouldn't say that because there's always another one. It tends to be that way. I know you've studied this, you've been looking as a council at this issue for a long time. What are the impacts that you've been able to determine to either residents near that, businesses near that, and what's your community's take on this project?
It's been mixed.
Sure.
There's most of the public is actually, I'll be real honest, we are not supportive of this, but we'll ask the simple question, what's your solution? And they don't have one. And I don't think anybody has a true solution. I don't think this is going to be a guaranteed win-win 100%, but we've got to do something. And like Ray said, we've got to be proactive. We've got to move forward. So we're going to have our bumps and bruises along the way, but I think all in all, in the end, it should be a lot more effective than it is right now. Just going around our community right now, we've lost business opportunities because of the homeless situation. We've the impact from the fire district. I mean, we were shipping a lot of people over to Lebanon for no reason. Having a doctor on site, I think, will help a little bit. I mean, I think all in the end, it's going to be a win-win, but again, bumps and bruises are going to come. So, but there's been a lot of impact in a lot of ways. As you know, a lot of people see the mess and it turns them off immediately, especially when they come to your community. And we're trying to attract business. We're trying to attract people to our community, and they see that, and sometimes they turn around and take off because they say, well, that ain't not what I want. But this is an ongoing problem in every community. So I think it'll be a win-win, but not a 100% guarantee. So,
Mr. Mayor, may I?
yeah,
Commissioner, if I could add, we also understand this is going to be a bit of trial and error. The initial rollout is probably going to be a little rough. We're trying to change behaviors to a degree with some people who, quite frankly, are living the way they're living because they've resisted normal behaviors, so to speak. It's not going to be a walk through the park, and it's certainly not going to come without trial and error. And I'm sure we'll sit down with FAC at some point in time, and we'll all probably be pulling our hair out, wondering what in the world are we supposed to do from here. But I don't think that means you don't try it, and I kind of think that's where we're at. The impact this is having on our community is too great to ignore, and as we discussed, the Ninth Circuit and the legislature has mandated if you're going to do anything, you have to do something first, so to speak. And so this is just that something. We think Walla Walla staff believes Walla Walla is a great model. Walla Walla has been extremely supportive in answering questions and spending time with us. Ironically, the executive director of their facility is from the area here. Will it be perfect? Absolutely, it will not be. Homelessness is a wicked, wicked issue with lots and lots of causes. But we just feel like we have to give it a shot. At least staff feels like we have to give that a shot.
Well, and currently our core downtown area is being significantly impacted. The filth, the feeling of being unsafe. We have to do something. And it's really difficult for our community because they've had the disadvantage of only seeing tent cities as examples. And that's really hard for them to trust and to understand that there are other choices out there. And I think that once we get where we want to be, we're going to be okay. And we're going to be a lot farther ahead. No, not perfect, but we're going to be farther ahead from where we're at. And our core downtown won't be killed by what's happening down there. We've got to do something.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, the other thing is the beauty of this site is that to the north and to the east, there's really nobody to bother. And to the west and to the south, it's incredibly well screened. And so it really has the potential for meeting the court rulings that have been handed down when it comes to access to services and access to stores and things like that, while at the same time being very well screened and hidden from view, such that it's not going to really bother very many people.
So, I'm working off of assumption.
You gotta love technology.
No, I'm not going to say what I was going to say. Back to my point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm working off of an assumption, and I haven't heard it specifically addressed in this room yet tonight. So I need to check in and make sure that I'm accurate. And that is when you talk about the courts, you're talking about the Boise decision. And if I understand that correctly, and Chief, you're probably maybe the best suited for this point. The Boise decision, in essence, says as a city or a government, if you aren't providing adequate sheltering opportunities, and I don't know what the definition of that is, then you need to open up your public spaces, if that's correct, like your parks. And please correct me if I'm wrong at any point. So that really puts some cities in a corner, because you either need to come up with something like we've been discussing here, or you need to choose to let people camp in your parks, and that then would be okay. And am I understanding that right? Because obviously there needs to be a resolution there that's legal and appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely, you're correct. And not just the Boise ruling, but the Grants Pass even took it a little further. And so with those, I think it's imperative we have an option that we can help deal and protect our public spaces, specifically our parks and other open areas. Right now, I don't feel that we can even do much about that. We can control some things, basically time and space, but an individual still has a right, based on the court rulings, to keep themselves warm, dry, out of the elements, and that really has a potential to impact all of our public spaces in our community. And so, without some facility that has adequate space and bed space, and the city attorney can probably speak more clearly on what our belief of bed space is. There's very little that our community can do, that law enforcement has really the authority to do to move people around and out of our. A lot of work's gone into some of our parks in our community, and it's really we're concerned about that. And really, we have limited options right now without some type of facility where we can direct those suffering from homeless. And the site itself, we spent a long time looking for a specific site. And just as Blair had mentioned, this does check quite a few of the boxes off. Really, the neighbors are going to be pretty well insulated from potentials there. Could there still be issues? Absolutely. But this was the best location that we could find within our community that checked the boxes we felt needed to be checked.
So, Mr. Mayor, if I may, so I think one more thing that I want to bring up here is that, yes, this is a physical facility for people, for homeless people, but we also need to get them the services. And this is having them in a specific location makes it much easier to do that. And that's one of my big pushes on this.
I know we've had a lot of success stories out of Walla from that very point. So, any other feedback? Somebody have another feedback? Okay. Anybody else have any feedback? County commissioners? Any thoughts? Okay. Okay. Based on consensus, we will be moving forward immediately on that. I appreciate it, County Commissioners, for your support in this matter. So, moving on now to the next topic is mill property. I know that's been a struggle for everybody over the last year or better. I think we're all on the same common ground here as far as what our goal is to get that back from the tax rolls of the county. So that said, I kind of want to give you a little insight of the county commissioners I'm not aware of yet. some of our successes we've had so far over the last year or better. We negotiated, that's 24th, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, it's 24th. We've negotiated with property owners to turn that in from a 2-lane street to a 4-lane, all the way back to the tracks. I know that we've had discussions, I think, with you, Will, and other county commissioners about from the railroad tracks back of continuing on back to our quarry park, which eventually will be our jamboree or park. Turn that into 4-lane all the way back. So we've also had success with ODOT Rail of getting that crossing taken care of. I think that's been huge. And we're also right now in negotiations with a private public party entity of developing the jamboree grounds or the park grounds, which is very positive. So it's kind of one of the other reasons why we're somewhat motivated to getting this developed so that we can help push this even forward with what we're ultimately trying to accomplish. And I know that it's been a struggle for the commissioners to come up with a solution. I know we've got cleanup issues that we're having to deal with. I know that that's been ongoing. And I think what from the council's standpoint is how can we come together with you folks and partner up to move this forward in a direction that benefits not only the county but for the city and streamline this even better. Some of our discussions was us willingness to do the master plan for county commissioners, if that's agreeable. The other is that see if from the county standpoint, if you can help in any way streamline the cleanup process, because I know that it's been going around and around and around. I know DEQ is an issue. I know that there's been discussion of us taking over the property, but then we don't have the cleanup capabilities. I mean, from the funding, the grants, and everything involved in the cleanup on our end. So, is this one thought we had too? Was as far as from our side, if it's possible that is there anybody within the county, whether it's the county commissioner or somebody within the county that can be like the liaison, they can work directly with DEQ or any other entities to help with the NFAs and in moving this forward on the property, because I know that's the biggest hiccup of us moving this thing forward.
I'm not sure.
You were good.
I'm not sure that we had are waiting for an NFA. We're waiting for right now. We have a containment qualification we're waiting for, and waiting for DEQ to respond. Then there'll be a 30-day public period where the public will be allowed to send things in, and then we will wait for DEQ to issue a final statement that the plan that has been proposed by the company we've hired to help us here, actually Weyerhaeuser's hired to help us here, it met the state's requirements about how to contain the contamination. Then there's also the buildings with asbestos. So we've gone through, I think, all the NFAs we can get, which was no further action required, and those are based upon the fact that they weren't used by the mill before, they were not contaminated by the mill, and all the ground testing we did didn't come up with anything. The water we tested, we made milkshakes out of a lot of little things out of that water for weeks, trying to find bad things in there, and then we could find nothing in that water. So we're not expecting a no further action. What we're waiting for is for the DEQ to finish their period of time, and they've had it for a while, to respond and finish that they've looked at our containment plan as proposed by the team that Weyerhaeuser and Linn County has hired. And then the public gets a chance to have a period. It goes back to the state, and that will then be a requirement. Whoever buys the property, develops the property, has to meet those fill containment issues. And then there's as I said before, the asbestos in the multiple buildings. Those someone needs to have an application, spend the $500,000 to do that, estimated $500,000 to do that, to take it down. But the person has to be very, very well qualified to take down rotting buildings, because when you start taking that roof apart, it will lose its structural integrity. So just want to make sure that no further actions usually means that you've applied for something, and that's not that I'm aware of anything we're waiting for, no further action. We're actually waiting for a plan to be approved that has more public process to go through, and then we'll be done. They estimate roughly a year. So at least the DEQ has been telling us that roughly a year before we'll probably see the final containment issues.
Okay. So is a master, for us doing the master plan, would this help expedite this in any capacity, or what's your thoughts on us doing the master plan?
So again, my thoughts, we've had plans and thoughts at the county. We've tried different things. The last time we tried to talk to some developers about possibly buying the entire thing, the good with the bad, and then taking on some responsibility for the cleanup pieces and moving forward those plans. We didn't reach a consensus. We didn't reach an agreement to move that forward that way. Coming out of that, I talked to Ray about doing a master plan, because a master plan to market the property with what the possibilities really are, and the city aligns with that, would be a great thing. And so we've wanted to see a look again, and I've understood that the city has been meeting with developers and talking about what might be done there in some areas. There are pockets, and I think the city knows them well. There are pockets of that property that were the old orchard, that were old park area. There's some areas there that are in fact no further action, and someone could buy those properties, could start development, and that could start as simple as, once we have, in fact, we could even do it without the master plan, without leaving it zoned the way it is. But the people who would be offering would know that they need to work with the city to correct the zoning, not correct the zoning, to have the zoning match what your desire is for that area. But the big chunk of it, all the concrete slab, that's under this fill containment plan that we're waiting for DEQ to give back their response. Then Warehouse will respond to that and put it out for public notice. And that's takes roughly a year left to go before that is probably done.
Okay. So I'm just wondering if there's any other thing we can do to help expedite, or is we just time is time.
Oh.
Yeah.
11 years.
I have a bias. Fast enough to then set up subdivisions that are stuck in and tax bill and things do. I could run up in our local nation housing is hot development is hot. Very concerned. Financial analysis at the time was it sold it to some value have changed value of the activity. So I feel like certainly I'm willing to and should have to say but if rocks tomorrow, somebody would write a check for that and they can utilize that make investments admire Commissioner Tucker's, I really like the energy and attitude. I am, again, very concerned about the time. This morning I turned on a financial news show, and inflation today is somewhere between 6 and 8%. I really believe that. Interest rates look to be going up, and what's that do to housing, and what can we do? We don't do something, and we get the economy goes south on this. That probably sits here for 10 years because we didn't execute. So all of the conversation we have for me is in that line. I'm concerned about master planning now, and whatever reasonable people can decide, I would support it. But in this case, because the value of the property is more than us, but what's left, we're better off getting this property in private hands.
That's kind of, I guess that's kind of where I asked the question because I'm probably wrong with this assumption, but I asked a question recently about if the county was willing to turn over any property, and I know it's zoning issues and property line adjustments, and we can go on all day, but turning over property that is ready to go, because we've had a lot of interest, or I'd say developers or investors that have came to the city, said, hey, we're ready to go. We're ready to dump the money right now and build. But as you said, they don't want the cleanup. And that's kind of the catch-22 here. And I know, I don't know the solution to that at this point, but I mean, we could probably build as fast as they can come, but
Felt really good for the community. That then really the option is to sell.
Trask, you sort of asked if we would give it to the city, and we've seriously said that day, and I'm still serious today, that if the city would like to take it on, you don't have to do the tear down and clean up, and in the relationship with Weyerhaeuser could be established and maintained, and with DEQ and EPA, you could do that work. We've been limited by how much we want to spend of staff time and energy, and we've been doing one after another after another. And in the last 3 years, we've received those NFAs, but we didn't have consensus to sell off pieces. We're now at a point with now 4 NFAs, and with plans for the larger concrete area, and with a pretty good understanding of the asbestos, I think Chair Nyquist is correct. We're at a point where someone could sell it. If we sell it, we will need to put the money back in the taxing district, but you'll get a piece of that money, and we're happy to give that to you. And so that is one possible way to go. The other way is to sell off some pieces. I think that I do believe that the containment plan would be such that if you put streets and sidewalks and don't do vegetable gardens, and there's a whole bunch of things that are in the draft documents, if those things are met, the upper area could be used as well. And so we're getting close to being done, but if it's not fast enough, the city can certainly take it on and go faster, or we could prioritize things differently, but we have not put a concerted effort to get this one cleanup. We've done lots of cleanups and lots of firefightings, and we've had multiple mills given to us by abandonment, and we've cleaned those up, sold one in Lyons just a few weeks ago. And so it is something we'd want to do, but where is the city about your taking it on it and moving it forward?
Mr. Mayor, if I might, I would question anybody wanting to buy that property and have to spend $500,000 cleaning that up, or maybe possibly more. We had a number of $750,000. That's a big chunk of money, and I don't know who would do that. and maybe if you broke it up and that stuff, but somebody's gonna have to clean that up someday. It's not gonna be like we're gonna put a homeless shelter in there. So that was my biggest concern. If you have somebody that offered you a thing and we didn't get through that part, and that's fine, that's your decision to make. But I don't know who would buy that for that kind of money. I don't know. Maybe they would. I hope they would. But what are we going to do? Are we going to have to sue Weyerhaeuser to make them clean it up? I don't know. I don't know. I know you guys have went through a lot of stuff. We should have started not first, by the way. Just I'm kidding. But I mean, you guys have done a lot of good work. There's no doubt about that. My biggest concern is that getting someone to buy that property for already owing $500,000. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. I really don't. I don't know.
Mr. Murray.
We did have bids, and one of those bids was a company that had one of their players be a company who we've talked to outside of that bid about them doing the cleanup. The company out of Portland that recycles lumber and timber, and he wants both the long wood that's on the side of the building as well as he wants the beams in the building. And they were willing to offer a couple $1 million for that site, including knowing that that piece was there. But we've now gone farther. We've continued our work on cleaning things up. So we've gone a little farther than we were when we gave them the thumb drives of what we knew a few months ago. We know more today. But it's still going to be a while, unless we go to the auction, and we can go to auction in a week. Actually, 30 days.
Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Could we have a review of what the DEQ suggested to the city council a few meetings back in regards to this piece of property?
Yeah.
So based on the comments they gave us related to that, actually, Joe did put a little map together and which kind of outlines the issues that they spoke of. Is this what you're kind of referring to as far as the issues with the property? Or?
Yes, this is some of the issues, and also the implications if Sweet Home were to take this piece of property on, and how that impacts us, and how it impacts Linn County differently. Thank you.
So it was explained to us, councilors, commissioners here, it's been explained to the city that if we take ownership, we become a POP, essentially a liable party in eternity, for eternity. But that because you have it in repossession, the tax repossession, you're given certain protections down the line that we would not be afforded. It's also been explained to us that at least until there are NFAs or phase 2s of CMMPs in place, those kinds of things. And also that resource-wise, because you took it in a foreclosure, you have access to the resources that we would not have access to. That's what was explained to us.
So focusing a little bit on the warehouse. My understanding, and somebody please correct me if I'm inaccurate, that Weyerhaeuser has the responsibility of cleaning up. And I guess my question would be, and I know I had a conversation earlier this year with somebody from Weyerhaeuser and somebody that I have a relationship with. Basically, I said, come on, get it done. Where are we at on that? What tools would be available to the city, and what tools would be available to the county? Would they be the same, or would they be different? To perhaps force Weyerhaeuser's hand, as the city said, or is that like not even a good option or idea? I'm just trying to understand how we can maybe just advance the football 2 more yards down the field, if that's even feasible.
Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
I believe the way it was explained to us is that Oregon is a voluntary cleanup state. generally the state doesn't like to say Barrett Street as liable parties or potentially liable parties. So it was explained to us that we could certainly go higher up in DEQ and ask them to apply more pressure. And of course, we live in a litigious society. As a city, we could pursue some type of litigation as well. But it was trying to explain to us that we really don't have any recourse other than whatever pressure we could convince DEQ or the EPA to put on more housing. I believe that's how it was explained.
That was all I was explaining. And it came, Mary with DEQ basically said she was almost to the point of they're spinning wheels now, and unless we go up the ladder, we can't do anything more than what they've done.
Maybe this isn't fair, but I want to ask to connect with Will, but you have more history than I have. What your impression, understanding what warehouses, what we can push, if we can push, I guess what that relationship looks like, or will there come a point in time when somebody hires an attorney and says, attempts to sort of clean it up else? I'm trying to get an understanding of how we can follow them.
Okay, so our relationship with Weyerhaeuser is one of our largest employers, one of our largest tax holders, as well as a community member that is actively engaged in our community, has been good. It's been strained. We've taken away Upper Calapooya Road from them. We've had some rocky relationships. The conversations here have been difficult. They have been difficult because they bought a company. They also gave this property to somebody who thought they was going to give them some relief from some liability. And those things all didn't match. They have consistently taken some work for us to reach a mutual understanding, and we've been able to do that. It's part of what has taken time, is not gone to court and sued one of our largest employers, one of our largest property owners, and community people. We've not wanted to sue, and we've been able to get them to come up with us, and there's been grants, absolutely. Because we got it as tax foreclosed property, we have access to grants, of which sometimes they're 100%, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're 80%, sometimes 75%. So a grant for $3 million looks good until you realize that you're going to come up with $100,000 yourself to match that grant, or a couple $100,000 to match that grant. So our relationship with them is such that we have continued to work with them, and this, what I see on here in terms of like the comments about the pond site. I know that pond site, I felt comfortable a couple years ago offering that out to trying to find a first possible tenant to buy a piece of property there and going and engage there. And DEQ, this looks to me like their most conservative worry in their request. I'm not sure that particular one, I would agree that we aren't going to end up someplace slightly different. And where it says this CONC on the far right hand side, I also think that they're being very conservative. But with the left-hand side, this whole western edge of this property, that is that contaminated media management plan piece that we're trying to produce right now with an outside consultant and with Weyerhaeuser's support financially and with grant support that we're trying to produce, that has probably less than a year, but has months of more time to run. And then we still have those buildings with asbestos, as well as, even when we're done with that, some of the conditions that are laid out here about people's, if we sell properties, there would be some properties, the ones that say NFAs, those could easily, people can do vegetable gardens and do all those types of things. There are other areas here where there needs to not be vegetable gardens because there could possibly be dioxins and things in the soil. And so we want to make sure that the people who buy the property are developing it correctly. All I can tell you is that Weyerhaeuser has been and continues to be a partner to the county, and we're not in the threatening mode, and I would not want to get there, but it does take time. They are a privately held company that it's publicly traded, but they are a held company that has to watch their financials and has mills and issues like this across the United States. And so as they work with us, they're working in other communities across the United States as well. And I know it's only here that we're worried about today, but it is when we're trying to get their attention it does take us, and we have plotted along with them through lots of different programs with DEQ. And for me, the challenge with DEQ, it seems like they haven't found one more test they haven't wanted to run. Every time I turn around, there's one more test. Every time we think we have a improvement and nothing was found in the amphibians we dug up, they want us to take up mud next. And so whatever it might be, working on this issue for the last few years, Weyerhaeuser has been as good a partner as DEQ has been, maybe, in terms of dealing with them time-wise, commitments for money. DEQ has helped us get money. Weyerhaeuser's helped us get money. And so they both have come through. But it does take staff time. It takes some management time. And it's an ongoing challenge. But the ones that say NFA on there are truly, in fact, things that by looking at history and by doing dozens and dozens of holes and digs, those areas have not found any reason that they could not, no further action, they could be, in fact, residential pieces of property. A road, getting 24th put in, could, in fact, happen right over the top of that as long as we meet the containment issues of the contaminated soils, as long as we asphalt fill and go over the top of it. So there's, to me, it's Weyerhaeuser is, like many businesses are, is in a tight place. Maybe it's a good time to talk to them, except they did lose a lot of property to fire this last year. But they are doing well otherwise in the stock market. They're doing well. So maybe it's a time to talk to them about moving up. Can they help us with tearing down the buildings?
Go ahead, Mr. Mike.
So if we back up just a step, based on this map and the colors of it and all the notes on it, if I were sitting in the chair, and in fairness to Councilman Charles, I don't think that we opted to take the property. Whereas he, of course, asking for input. And my response was input, heck, I'll give you the, or I asked him if you have.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but I was a little bit short on the 500,000. That's the reason I didn't take it.
Okay, all right. So I just want to progress. So if I were sitting in Churchill with the lack of shield from liability, if you will, I probably wouldn't want this one. I would probably conclude it wasn't in the city.
That's where we're at.
Okay, good. So I understand. So then if you look at the map, a more colorblind, I guess, look, without all these yellows and greens and reds on it, I see FAs and further actions for CNFA, which is something. Conceivable further action? Is that what the CNFA is?
Conditional.
Okay, conditional. And I see a CONC. Commissioner Tucker, help me with that.
Concurrence letter.
All right. So look, with and the underlying zoning is an issue. And I'm going to back. If I'm a developer and I'm buying property and then I'm selling multiple lots at $100,000 a lot, and I can get 6 lots an acre. This thing becomes financially viable real quick. Even with all these letters and all the colors. I if we were to put this up for auction, I think we would sell. I don't know what we would sell it for, but somebody would pay enough money to have a vested interest in executing and redeveloping this property. Now, what the zoning would be, and what they can make, and what the city envisions, would then be between that property owner and the city. That the would-be or potential property owner reasonably would come to to you before they attempted to make that offer to get your thoughts on the rezoning, what they could actually do there, because I think I'm telling you, most of this, if not all of this, you couldn't build houses. Is that right?
No,
The areas that have an NFA but not a conditional NFA. So that northwest portion could be residential. That northern strip could be residential. The area that's CONC, that's concurrence, that basically means that DEQ has looked at it and been like, there's never been any problematic activity on this property. Right. So they're not going to give an NFA because there's no reason to. But the middle area and the CNFA on the western lot would be definitely not residential. Could be commercial and industrial. Just one thing I want to add, though, I'd like your take on, if I could, is that these properties in the middle, parcels 10, 11, 12, and 9, they're kind of in a no man's land where the county's not actively working on them and Weyerhaeuser's not working on them. And so my concern and our concern, as we've talked to staff, is what happens with that. DEQ seems to think that there is some work that would need to be done, at least for that to get an NFA or a concurrence. We're just concerned that we don't want it to fall through the cracks.
So thank you for that. So I just big picture. Again, I'm just projecting what I'm seeing in the marketplace and what the economy doesn't change and factors on it. Highly likely we get an offer that is substantial enough to vest somebody's commitment to this property, which I think is unlike the last situation that put us all here in the first place. Remember, right, there was very little down and a lot of vision, hope, and speculation. Cash on the barrel had changes. I think the risk would be a risk to the county first, and a risk to future boards of commissioners, maybe future city councils with the area, where the pond is. And if there's enough contamination there, that financial model to deal with that, I fear would be that they build a tax lot be created around that parcel, and the property taxes not be paid on that. And 6 years from now, the county could be the proud owner of that pond, and we would be right back here again. But at least we would be right back here, property-wise, on a 10 to 15% level of what we are. I just think over the last 12 years we've tried to look cognizant of the partnership. Before I do that, the Weyerhaeuser, it's really not as simple as this calling Weyerhaeuser and thinking they that up and that actually happened. They've been in the loop with us the whole way and talking to environmental attorneys and mediators, and it isn't just going to be that simple, and that is going to take time as well. So, again, I just feel like we're at a point where property is not perfect. It's done enough work that it is now marketable for investment. And tomorrow, 80% of it would be utilized.
So, Mr. Mayor, may I ask, so Commissioner Nyquist, may I ask a question? So if you say you want to put it up for auction, are you saying put up the whole piece, or are you saying put it up parcely wise?
Because time is of the essence of it.
And we've done that, you've done that in the past.
Yeah, some time ago, before we made the progress we have.
Okay.
The last RFP request we made was much more technical in nature. We required more things. This cumulatively didn't turn out the way.
Okay. So, I'm impatient. Sorry to explain that to you, but could we have a timeline on this? If you decide to do this, I think that it would benefit us to know how we can move forward with this, how you would move forward with this.
I would ask council and staff how we do this, that.
Okay.
I'm not even sure procedurally that we would have to put it on auction. I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, somebody walked in tomorrow and made an offer. Not that that's how I would want to do it, but we could accept or deny that cash offer. The thing really keeping us from, one of the things keeping us from doing that today is the partnership and the technical issues. My best guess here is one. Tomorrow we go back and say put it up front.
Yeah, you could put it up for auction. You did put it up for auction quite a while ago, essentially to essentially clear that legal hurdle. Nobody met the minimum bid, but because there was a minimum bid, my understanding is in order to accept an offer, just ad hoc like that, it would need to be, I think, 25% of the minimum bid that was required at the initial auction, or you could just go out to auction again, either a live auction or a sealed bid auction, and there's probably some advertising requirement that we would need to meet with that, but Commissioner Tucker has.
So there is a 30 days, we'll have to advertise the 30 days if we go out for auction. So that is one option, is to go out for auction. The thing that worries me, the thing that has worried me and why I continue to work on piece by piece by piece, is we go out for auction, we sell the whole thing. And the Smith brothers or whoever might buys it, they take the pieces where there's no NFAs on them, and they develop those. And they do it just what Chair Knight was just talked about 10 years from now, 6 years from now, they walk away, and they've received and recouped their money. And yes, you as the city, and yes, we as the county, now go sue them, but we're back to old data, new standards, and having to reset everything. And so the push I've done, and I apologize for taking too long to do it, but the push I've done has been take a piece of property, take one area of concern, and try to solve it. And if you read like a green box, if you read the left-hand side, the west edge of that paper, it talks about it could be this or it could be that. The results of those tests say that water's not in as bad a shape as everyone thought it was going to be. Possible dioxin, possible this, possible that. We didn't find those things. But my concern is if we do an auction tomorrow or the end of the month, we get some price, will that person be here 10 years from now, 20 years from now? Will they complete those pieces that are the more difficult ones? It's taken years to get a plan up that you agreed to on the water. And I promise you that not once, not twice, not three, but 4 times or 5 times, they've come back and added one more test that we had to go test for, one more set of samples, one more day of flow rate of water to figure out what's going on, one more time, a new map of what he wants soil samples taken from. And so all I can tell you is that the county's put through that, and I'm not sure that a developer for some of the ones that might make an offer a month from now, would they be willing to do that and continue to put the money in to make that happen? Because they won't have the grants available to them that we have.
Well, go ahead.
No, good.
One of my concerns was if somebody comes along and buys that whole property, and as a city, we have a vision of how we would like to see that property developed. And right now, it's zoned commercial recreational. But I know that we've had discussions of splitting it up in commercial. I don't know so much about recreational, but residential and even keeping some of it industrial. And that's why I asked the question, if we come back and if it's, and obviously I think you've answered the question, but if we created the master plan and present you the master plan based on the vision of how the city wants to develop this, would like to see that property developed from the county side of it, if you can, that's why I say Liz on to push the buttons of DEQ or whatever. I don't know the inner workings of what you guys are doing on your end with DEQ and all the other entities, but if you can help with a cleanup on your end, we produce the master plan, and then we also basically bring you the developers or the people that want to buy it based on the vision we have as a city to your front door, and then sell it once it is totally cleaned up. Move forward.
Mr. Mayor, you retain control of that now.
Yeah.
And you would, and a sale by us does not include retaining control of that.
No, I understand that, but if somebody buys it, they don't know, they're just buying it, and then they're gonna come to the city and say, okay, I'm ready to develop it, and then they realize that's not our vision. Maybe they want to make it the whole thing as a low housing income or low income housing development, and that's not necessarily what the city is looking at.
Guess is they likely would check in with you.
We'd hope.
But if they didn't, there's no obligation on you to change anything from what.
True. And we know that, but the other side of that too is it'll just sit empty and nothing happens, and they won't develop it based on making not a good smart move of finding out if they can do it in the first place. But we've had people that have came before the city and wanted to buy it, but they didn't do the due diligence, and it's all on them obviously, but that's what I'm trying to avoid them in that area.
So,
Mr. Mayor, if I can,
Is that making sense?
Commissioner, my concern, above and beyond what we talked about that day and then when we talked on the phone, my concern is this big push on new houses and all that stuff? Are we going to get in a situation like we did in the 80s? Was that when it was, when the market went in the toilet and then we got people that can't make a payment and we're gazillions of dollars in debt and blah, blah, blah? Because that happened to us here, I think it was in the 70s or 80s. I remember when it was on 29th Avenue. And we held those properties forever. But you know what I mean? Is you think the market's going to be high enough that these people will be able to? I know you'd have to just. In my opinion, I don't know that it's going to stand up. I mean, for a long time, I don't know.
I'm trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
It would help me sitting here tonight if I could from I would love what each of you are hoping and desiring, not only of this property, but from us to help you get to that goal with the property. I know how two people feel, but I don't know how the majority feels, and I'd like more direction on what it is you'd like to see.
I'll start off with Councilor Gorley, and then we can go around.
I think the sooner. I hate this thing. It's got my number and it drives me crazy. Okay, so I think the sooner we get homes back and this property back into where people are able to pay taxes and be viable, I think the better. And whatever it takes to get from here to there is important. I don't know that the property there with Weyerhaeuser that's in the green will ever be super viable, but certainly Weyerhaeuser could be hauling in dirt and make that into a nice park at least. And then that leaves the big buildings on you. I'm not really sure if there was more value in the wood and the beams at that time when you had somebody looking at it before. Certainly those beams and that wood would be worth more now than then. If all the rest of it developed and we had a park in the middle of it and the one lot that's really big that has asbestos on it was the only piece not developed right now, we'd be doing the happy dance. And so I really think that we just need to move forward with what we can and get people building.
I agree with Councilor Gore. I think it's just I hate to say this, but I'm almost sick of dealing with this. It feels like it's been going on forever, and I would just like to see it developed and just as soon as possible would be good. But I just feel like it's something we need to get done.
So I was wondering when Commissioner Nyquist was talking about auctioning, if we did a master plan and you auctioned it according to the master plan, that might be helpful in terms of what people then who are interested in the property would see what the city's vision is and would be up to that. That's my point of view.
That was mine. It's the same sentence as Councilor Gerson, same thing. Develop the master plan, then you guys know how to sell it off. But I'm hearing you guys can't sell it off. You're not agreeing to selling it off in piece anyway, so.
I'd be excited to see this thing sold, and I don't care if it sells in pieces or in one big chunk. I do know that we as a council have dreamt of ideas, and we have some ideas of what we'd like to see what happens. We know that also that is retained in our control right now, and we can manage the zoning accordingly. So I think since it's your guys' property still, you can do with it as you please, and we'll figure it out from there. But that's my personal opinion.
So I hear Commissioner Nyquist saying he could make a significant amount of money, and I'm just wondering why the city can't be the ones to make that amount of money. So if you would give it to us and then we could sell it to the people that want to buy it from you, let us know who it is so we can make a profit too.
My conversation with you over at the county place was, I'm not sure I like breaking it up in one piece at a time. I'm not sure I'm okay with that. I would rather see the property sell the whole thing and then get over with it and not have to deal with portioning this off and this other off. And it may work fine. It may. I mean, I'm just guessing. But I just like to get it over with. And I know you guys too. So to me, I think the sooner the better. I don't know about a consensus of the council that would say, yeah, let's get going, sell it, do whatever you're going to do, and let's get going.
I don't know what that looks like.
Like, I think what it would do is it would inform bidders that, hey, this is what the city envisions for this. So if you're going to buy this, understand that this is what you're buying potentially. Concerns, a couple of things I heard. One is giving the property to the city. You know, the downside to that is I believe that unless you pay that minimum amount required, you would be required to keep it in public use for 20 years or something like that. So that would pretty much negate the ability to do just a direct grant to the city on that. The other thing is I don't know, how long does it take you do you anticipate it would take you to develop a master plan and get it all approved for this area? Because that again goes into the issue of the timing on this, you know, and getting this out. Is that like a 3-month process or a 6-month process or a year?
We had that discussion, and I think it was probably no more. Go ahead, Blair. No more than 6 months, but maybe sooner.
Yeah, we're assuming that by master plan, we're talking about a road network and the plan of where the utilities would go, and then the zoning and parcelization, how it's divided up into properties. And if you're talking about that, then we're looking at probably a 6-month process, depending on how much public interaction there is, how many seats there are at the table when it comes to deciding all those factors. Obviously, the more people you throw into that mix, the longer it's going to take, but minimum 6 months.
So theoretically, we kind of put that up for option. Anybody that they can bid whatever they want to bid. But they should and would know that there's a master plan and that this is a general direction the city would want to go. And if their idea was to, I don't know, do something crazy or something, they could bid on the property all they want, and then the owners of that property and we, the city, can argue and debate that out and figure out where to go. So the master plan is in no way binding. Just this is the vision of the city, and if you with this, know that this is who you're working with, and you gotta work it out. Is that fair?
So if I can just add one thing, I think that serious developers, they know the rules and they understand that zoning can be changed, and they understand they have to work with the community and they have to provide green space and they have to pay for infrastructure. And so I think that more than likely, if you're talking about a serious developer bidding on this, they're going to understand all that, and they're not going to, buy it for, $50,000 and think they're going to come in and do something crazy, to use your terminology there, I think. But there could be some potential, if we put it up for auction, to at least put out a fact sheet or something so that we could put people on notice.
So I think, are we in agreement that if we do a master plan, then does that sound doable? Then we can turn that over to the commissioners and you guys can do the option? Is that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the same way any other land use decision is appealable. So for this particular situation, you'd be looking at you would need to do a comp plan amendment and then the various zoning changes. So those are going to require public hearings in front of the commission, public hearings in front of the city council. And like all land use decisions in the state of Oregon, everyone has standing to contest them, and everybody can, they can be appealed. Now there is a appeal period, and so typically those appeals happen. The council or the planning commission will set that appeal period, so that there's some restriction on just how long you have to wait. But those are typically not that long, maybe 4 weeks at the most.
So but then would those decisions, final decisions be available to you?
Sure.
Could those decisions, if not successful, be a good decision?
I suppose so. I mean, like any land use decision, yes.
Land use decision. Right. So there's a window here, from my perspective, 6 months, assuming the years into the. And I do want to go back to Councilman Sanchez. As a county commissioner, my goal here is to do this and to create investment. I think the sale of the property would be divided proportionally by taxing districts. So I say that in this good plan. Attracting investment to the property for the community. Years into something. And the economy is still very just the time. So I guess that I'm taking the question, we're good with the sale, we're good with the sale of the whole thing. The question stuck out there is yes, the council wants to master plan the property. I would argue that you already have control over the zoning now.
Mr. Mayor,
Okay.
I actually agree with Commissioner Nyquist on this. I'm a little concerned about spending 6 months or possibly longer on a master plan. If we could produce a fact sheet like Mr. Lane had suggested that can go along with the auction so people are aware, we do have control over whether or not we change the zoning of that land, and we can still mitigate some of the development that happens there. I would rather see this. We all are a little anxious to get it off the books, back onto the tax rolls, and also to take advantage of the market as it is now. And we don't want to see it sitting there empty for another 15 years or so.
Mr. Mayor, one more item. The elements we're talking about for a master plan are separate. You know, there's the land use components, and then there's the infrastructure and the roadway components, and they don't necessarily take the same amount of time. The roadway components can be done quite quickly. It's a matter of dedicating that land and having the survey done, and having that, and that's not something that is a land use decision to be appealed. So that roadway connection for 24th Avenue, any of the internal roadways, that can all be done. And that, of course, does shape how it's parcelized and so forth. And ideally, you'd have your zoning based on, make sense within that plan. But that roadway network and that infrastructure plan is not really something that would be appealable, that would really take that long.
And I think the county's pretty consistently said that we would be willing to dedicate that roadway for that extension if you come up with a decision on where you want it and legal description. I haven't heard anything to the contrary from the board.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You can actually do both, can't you? You can do your fact sheet, but also do a master plan at the same time. Because I think you have to have some kind of a master plan, don't you?
My vision of a fact sheet would be something that kind of just describes the property, maybe even including something like this, and something that would be a statement or concurrence with the city on sort of what you expect that somebody who buys this property is gonna have, what kind of interactions they're gonna have with the city when they go to develop it. Something that just clearly lays out that, look, if you want to do something, you're gonna have to talk to the city, but maybe not quite that way, worded that way.
Yeah.
Mr. I don't like that 6 month number either. Again, on this, no, you're absolutely right, Commissioner Nyquist, that, well, we're going to be another year and a half or whatever. I mean, it'd be nice to have one. It'd be nice if we already had one. But what if we have a master plan here and the buyer doesn't want to do that? He wants something different. By the way, I think I'm on the same page as Councilor. Yeah. Anyway, I just went total blank. So, yeah. So I have had happen before. But I think an adequate number for the sale would be like 60-40. What, you think that's okay? Is that a little bit too low for you, or I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know. Oh, I don't know. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
So what it sounds to me like the master plan could possibly delay the opportunity in the window of getting the greatest return for the sale of the property and maybe open us up to some litigation. And so just the fact sheet, if we want to sell it quickly and get things developed quicker, would probably be the best way to go, it sounds like to me.
Well, I'm gonna throw the question back to Ray and the city. Is you guys talked about the master plan being the priority versus fact sheet? Enlighten us.
Kind of thinking that the fact sheet is more or less an informal master plan. It's kind of from the sounds of it. So it would essentially kind of be a visioning document, perhaps, if that's unofficial, indicating infrastructure, roadways, and potential uses. I guess, is that kind of what we're thinking, or?
I think it would be a very, very unofficial master plan, in that it would be more of a kind of a warning or notice to potential bidders that they're going to need to talk to the city if they are successful in getting this property. And I think you could provide a significant amount of input into what a fact sheet looks like. I'd hate for it to be like 30 pages, but if it was a page or two, that would be real doable.
So today we give them a thumb drive that includes all the environmental documents, and it's a thumb drive. It's a binder that's pretty thick. So we give them that. Everyone who's bid, everyone's come in and asked for it, we give them a thumb drive of all of that. So it is robust. My concern about moving forward quickly, again, is that we'll lose what little power we have with Weyerhaeuser when we now have it in a private party hand. That private party will have to deal with it. So we'll lose that piece, and the cooperation we've had has been millions of dollars. And so the question is just to know that that's the risk. That's the part that worries me the most about pushing it before we have completed the work we're trying to push through. But I'd rather have it back. I've always been a proponent of cutting off pieces, but I'm happy to do what you guys want, the whole thing one time. It would be easier, faster, and we're out. The county would be happy to be out of it.
Well, I'm all in favor with everyone. That's what the councilors have said. If I had my way, I'd have this developed tomorrow, but it's not reality. But again, my biggest concern with Weyerhaeuser is 11 years, going another 11 years, and another 11 years, another 11 years with them, and still nothing progressing. So it seems like we're not getting anywhere with Weyerhaeuser. It seems like it just keeps going, and we hear the same stuff, and that's why I'm asking the question.
I would apologize, but they've actually participated and paid for and have participated in many, many times, hundreds of thousands of dollars in this cleanup. So they have participated multiple times. Have they walked up and said, here's a blank check, do what you need to do to make it right? No, that has not been. But when we want to do a project, when we think we have enough bandwidth to manage it, we have gone to them, we've worked with them, we've talked to DEQ about grants, we've worked together, we've met together, exchanged letters, and we've so far always come to a path forward. But we've only been doing one thing at a time. Today, we're working on the surface, they call it contaminated media management plan, but we're worried about the topsoil of the larger chunks of land. And that's what we've been working on now, and that's the process we're in. I'm only concerned that, just know that, once we sell this to a private party, that Weyerhaeuser is going to step away. And we've warned them when we did our bidding process with the people, we had this RFP process. When we did that, we warned them that as you buy this property, be comfortable, have your engineers, your attorneys read these documents. This is where we are, and understand that DEQ might not see the same thing as the company we've hired. And oftentimes DEQ requires the companies we hire to write up the document, and then they review it, send it back to us 4, 5, 7 times to get it to a document they will accept when they issue their no further actions. It took some of those documents a year of flipping documents back and forth and back and forth. And Weyerhaeuser paid for all that attorney time. And so just know that as we do this, that is a risk. That for me is what the first risk is, whoever gets this, making sure that they've read the thumb drive, the documents that are there, and a smart developer would, and he'd know what he's getting into.
Any other feedback? Any other feedback from the council on this? Okay. Well, we kind of, we can go on all night on this. I think we kind of seen what you folks have brought to us and where you're sitting at right now. And I guess as a council, we'll probably have a little work session to discuss this further and see, what you're talking about, if we want to push this quick or just let you guys move it at the.
I'm not telling you not to push it quick. I'm happy to do whatever it does it takes and moves this forward. So I would rather just, if you guys have a consensus that you out of here and you want to write a document up that says we will have to you on this date a description, we can then make sure that the 30-day period for advertising bids is met. We advertise the bids and be happy to do an auction, and you guys could even come and sit in the audience and join us and watch and meet who's there. I'm sure, like with our last process, you met most of those bidders. They came and met with your staffs and talked about what they were thinking about doing as they put together their plans. And so I'm sure if the decision, it sounds like the consensus is action, and the risk, you're willing to accept the risk except that we end up accepting the risk as well, because we're the one to do the tax default if someone doesn't clean something up and we have to take it back, and then we've now lost Weyerhaeuser. And now we have to go after whoever that developer was. So it is a risk for us versus the plan we've been doing. But the plan we're doing, you're right, it's taken me, I would have thought 3-4 years. No, it took us over a whole year to do one just the other mill site, just to get the letter from DEQ through all the attorneys, 1 year to get a letter that said we could do the proposed purchaser agreement with them. And so I just know that DEQ is not the easiest department to work with. And this has been a challenge, but make sure you understand that Weyerhaeuser has participated. They've been actively involved. And again, they haven't lined up an open checkbook, but they have shown up with checkbooks, and they have spent time and energy on doing this.
No, I no doubt that, Will, at all. I guess we're a little nervous. Opportunities now, and like what Nyquist said, I don't want to lose that opportunity if it's there, but so like I say, as a council, we'll just further discuss this, I guess, in a work session, and we'll probably get back with you regarding it. Anyway, I thank you guys for your input. Well, discuss whether, send the information, you guys do the auction and move on, or not. I mean, what's your final thoughts?
Simple math. The council is
I'm assuming that's what the council is looking at. Yes. Yes.
So I was here tonight to take your input, and I've gotten that, and procedurally, I don't think a vote is required if you be insulted if we sell this property without y'all taking it. Tell me that, and this is the way. Otherwise, I know what I'm.
Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions of the council? Feedback?
My apologies. A member of my staff who's listening to the live stream of this wants to reiterate she believes that ultimately Weyerhaeuser would ultimately be possibly brought back into responsibility. So if my worst fear would be that somebody walks away and leaves the contaminated worst parts alone and just walks away and lets us foreclose on those, she believes that ultimately we would be able to tie it back to Weyerhaeuser by their purchase of Willamette Industries. But I have staff watching us.
Mr. Mayor, if I could, that's the danger of becoming a PLP. My experience, Boeing up in Washington, very similar case, was a PLP for a garbage site 60 plus years after they legally deposited something at the time. And that's the danger of becoming a PLP, is you're on the hook forever when you become a PLP.
I agree. Well, I thank you very much for your time this evening, commissioners, and appreciate everything you do again. And thank you for your input.
Thank you so much for the conversation.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I'm a little confused here. Are we, I'm glad you guys came. Are we saying that we want you to put this thing on the market now? Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
That's what we
Is
heard.
that what I heard?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that's
And
the,
thank you for coming. Appreciate it.
thank you.
Thank you, guys.
And one last thing is thank you, commissioners, but hopefully moving forward, we can have other future meetings and maybe even pick a restaurant and get together just to shoot the breeze. Just to say we're here for you. So. Okay. Thanks again. Thanks everybody for coming this evening. And we'll adjourn 7:30.